Okay, so first up, let's introduce the panel. I can come up one by one here. Jeet, Jeet Niyogi is the marketing director from Playtika Montreal, and they operate World Series of Poker. Jeet's an industry veteran. He was previously at EA, Autodesk, and Oracle. So you've probably seen him speak in the past. He's a pretty well-traveled guy and really well-known in the industry. So I enjoyed being able to have you.
Paid him $5 to say that.
Great. All right, next up, Matt Widdoes from Zynga. He's a senior user acquisition manager. Matt's team is responsible for everything from casual games to their top grossing social casino titles like Wizard of Oz, Willy Wonka, Hit It Rich, and Spin It Rich, as well as match 3 games like Wizard of Oz Magic Match and Ice Age Arctic Blast. I'm glad to have Matt on the panel because he's a very smart and thoughtful UA manager. And at Zynga, he's also got a really diverse data set in terms of what he touches day to day. So thanks, Matt. And next up, Wang. He's the co-founder and CEO of Fox Cub Games, which is an independent social casino publisher. You might have seen Ian speak last year at Casual Connect. Really nice talk about what it means to be a successful indie publisher in social casino. Ian's a veteran of like kind of the new school of social and mobile, where he's previously director of product at Zynga from 2009 to 2012, which was like a really critical time in the game industry. We learned a lot. So thanks, Ian, for joining the panel. Next up, Bryan Bennett, VP of Marketing at AGS Rocket Play. So Bryan's a tech industry veteran in Silicon Valley. Like Ian, he has a lot of experience in the new guard of game publishers like Kabam, where he was GM, Booyah, and then now at Rocket Play, which Bryan helped grow them to the point where they were acquired by AGS last year. And AGS is a large land-based slots game developer. So through the acquisition, Rocket Play got access to a lot of recognizable IP. And we're going to discuss that in a lot more detail later. Thanks, Bryan, for being on the panel. Last but not least, Owen O'Donoghue. Owen's been at Facebook for over 5 years now. His team is running all the iGaming, daily fantasy, social casino. It's a really great team that we work closely with for a long time now. Hopefully you caught his session earlier today. Owen's really seen the space grow up from day one. So he's bringing a really unique perspective from inside Facebook to this panel. So thanks everybody, and let's begin. So I want to like start out a little bit by acknowledging kind of in general like that games have been on the leading edge of all the new platforms in terms of like innovation and adopting UA strategies on top of the new platform. So they're usually like the first things that monetize on a platform. And they're usually the first that really understand advertising. So now that Facebook is a more mature platform in terms of the ads, you can think of the social casino people on the panel here represent kind of the best expertise at scale of like what we know about scale on Facebook. And they've been acquiring some of the most like valuable users at a big scale for multiple years. So it's a lot of learnings over this time, and today we're focusing on topics that don't always get talked about. That was the whole point of the panel. It was like, let's talk about the hard things, the things that people maybe don't emphasize enough. So we consider it, hopefully it'll be a very advanced session where you'll learn a lot today. So appreciate your attention. So all right, to start out. So first topic for everybody, we're going to talk about how competitive it is to buy on Facebook and Instagram today. So going back to the point of social casino being the most sophisticated buyers and always at the edge of new platforms, we've really reached a point of efficiency in the Facebook auction. And in general, like the biggest players, they know their audience and they understand the value of the users that they're bringing. It also means that like this kind of makes it, very difficult to reach the highest quality players. So let's talk about a few things that are more specific. So I think like we'll start there with like the reaching the highest value players in today's environment where it's very, very competitive to actually even surface an ad to like a very high quality player. Like how do you find and reach these players? Jeet, you want to start off?
Sure. Great question. I mean, Facebook is one of the most sophisticated targeting platforms out there. I mean, without any doubt. Not just because Owen is here and he paid me a handsome amount. So a couple of things. I mean, quick things. So now let's start with the basics. You could create a list of your high-value players. You build custom audiences. You build lookalikes. 1% lookalike. It's a no-brainer, but many people still don't do that. But that's a great starting point to find those high-value users. Then again, I think the second thing is how do you define your high-value players? It's not always just the ROI or ROAS or LTV, but for us, liquidity is a huge thing. So poker game, so it's an interactive. Other people are there, so we have built some models around the day 2 retention, day 7, day 15, day 14, and we bring that into place. And we work very closely with our analysts and data scientists to create the model, our weightage. And into this, then we marry the geography because every geo is different. US has a certain quality of retention and LTV, and other Turkey has a different. So we married that, and we have some weightage modeling. Obviously, we can't get into all the nitty-gritties. I have to go back. I love San Francisco, but I have to go back to work. So these are some of the things that we do. And some of it might seem more obvious than others, but there's certainly the biggest factor going on Facebook is it's growing. It's a growing space. So something like, say, a dynamic custom audience, it's refreshes. It's on a very regular basis, and so it's a growing list of people that you're targeting with your high quality. If you get a good list of high quality, it's being refreshed. Even dynamic custom audiences, lookalikes built out of dynamic custom audiences are excellent sources because it's refreshing. It's a good way to some of the things that we use in our space.
Yeah, I think to add to that, for anybody that's not using custom audiences, you should definitely be doing that in lookalikes, et cetera. But staying on top of the most recent releases, working with your reps, understanding kind of some of the more interesting and newer targeting capabilities, make sure you're using behavioral stuff or even using time of day, stuff like that. So just testing. Everybody kind of always wants to hear, like, what's the silver bullet and where can I go find a bunch of really inexpensive, high-value users? But at the end of the day, we have to continue to test and kind of think out of the box, and even if that means kind of brainstorming, thinking of sideways, ways that you can enter the market with things that are similar to your audience, as simple as that may seem, it's like getting out there, testing it, iterating, and then continuing that forever, basically.
So I think my situation is probably quite a bit different from the other guys up here. We're a lot smaller than everyone else here, and we're buying at like a much smaller volume, and we don't have the bankroll that these guys have to be buying. So for me, the question of like how do we reach our most valuable audience is that like I don't want to actually compete with these guys on trying to buy for the same users they're buying. So the way we approach it is we actually have a whole bunch of different slots games, and we use each individual game's like set of creatives to help us target what the next game's creatives are going to be. So we use the creative targeting for like performance on like CTR, conversion rate, App Store conversion, all the way through the funnel into like all your monetization stuff, and all the way through which themes are people playing to identify the next themes for what we're doing. And so what that does is, one, it gets us like the right kind of game to like get us organics that are the very valuable things. So that's one strategy that we do. And the other one is that because we buy at lower volumes, we get like I think that if we did like a comparison of like any of the conversion or App Store metrics that we have versus the other guys here, it would be like very, very different numbers, right? Because of the difference in scale. But because of that, we have like much higher conversion rates, much higher CTRs. And so because we're buying at the smaller volumes, we're able to kind of filter off like a layer of people that are very high value. So that's kind of our approach to it.
I mean, we're probably right in the middle. So we don't have the huge budgets of Zynga or Playtika, and probably maybe a little bigger than Ian's. But I mean, for us, I mean, Facebook is always obviously number one. I mean, we've tried lots of different things. We always come back that Facebook gets the vast majority of our spend, and it's for a variety of reasons, for all the targeting and and things of that nature. And what we really try to do is make the most out of that. So we do a lot of deep linking, trying to get people. The great thing about slot machines is you can use very specific creative, and then you can deep link to send someone once they click on that creative, or if they have an affinity for that slot machine or that creative, they can click on it and immediately, rather than go to the whole lobby situation and things like that, they can go right into the slot machine that they intended to play. So we're really trying to do a lot of things with deep linking to continuously give the user the best experience, in the hopes that will help them improve retention and also improve payer conversion down the line. But then other than that, a lot of the things that these guys are doing on Facebook, we try to do also with custom audiences and things like that.
Right. Yeah. You have something to add?
Yeah, I think this is working out. So I think the most interesting thing when it comes to there's a lot of scale on Facebook, but it's also highly competitive. What's always been probably what drew me into gaming within Facebook was how analytical the companies were, particularly social casinos and the MMOs, where they were the first real companies to understand lifetime value. And then the interesting thing about the auction in Facebook is that it rewards you bidding based off that. If you understand the value of your players by cohort, the system will try and give you as many players as possible, making it profitable for you. And what I've been actually surprised in is that the casinos have gotten better at it. I think the MMOs have gotten better, and some e-commerce players, but we still don't have, the real competitors could be the financial institutions, the people who are selling cars. They still are light years away from the industry here in terms of really understanding their customers. So I think it's as we're growing inventory the whole time. We're getting, I think, better with our targeting. I think it leaves there is room there to continue to grow profitably within the ecosystem.
Great. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's like a wealth of information around. Yeah, like Jeet mentioned at the start, figuring out ROAS targets based on LTV and segmenting that as much as possible. I think pretty much everyone on the stage is kind of like understanding that. So I think that's a key thing that if you're not doing that or you don't think you're doing the best job at that, you should really try to focus on for sure. I think we can drill down a little bit into that right now. So, as Owen just mentioned, really understanding your LTV is the key to scaling on Facebook. And this is how all these guys have reached these enormous results there. So let's go a little bit one by one. I think it's, I'm in the market constantly talking to new clients. Very few people have a really good, well-constructed LTV model that they're super confident in. It's fairly rare. So I don't think that everyone in the room really knows this that well. But I think it would be very helpful just to go down and hear about what goes into your mix, what methods you use to track the behavior in app, and then cohort and attribute the user data and value, and whatever you'd like to say about the keys to having an LTV model that you can be confident in.
Can I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Why did I sit at the first place?
Right.
No, I was kidding. So yeah, no, absolutely. I think the first most important thing is cohort. If you're not doing cohort data, because what we do is install data analysis. So install date cohort. So and then we work very closely with our data scientists, and we have developed some of the curves that we see based on historic data by platform, by geo. Again, because geos vary a lot sometimes. And so that is the first step in understanding the LTV. And I said, in our case, retention is also a big driver of the equation. So we have some weightage for the D2 retention, D7 retention. So everything sort of goes into the model. The nitty-gritties, again, of which I have some, but I can't even share, and I don't even understand a lot because there are some brilliant BI data scientist guys that are creating these models. But intuitively speaking, we know from a 3-day revenue standpoint what we are seeing. If you do a cohort-based RP, average revenue per install, you see a certain pattern through certain campaigns. And you quickly understand, and then you sort of take the next deep dive. Is it the creative aspect and what is working on it? And the creative optimization is one of the biggest influencers on the Facebook platform. So, and marrying the winning elements of a few various creatives and then testing it out. That is the second point. And the third thing is testing, and the ability, whatever platforms such as you guys and other guys in the room are offering, split testing is one of the biggest things with Facebook. Always be testing is sort of my team's slogan, and we do based on the campaign types. I can't quote any numbers off the top of my head, but crazy amount of testing. So and testing for everything, all the aspects, the messaging, the creative, and whatnot.
That's great.
Yeah, I would say, kind of adding to that, like you want to be able to, like, again, without getting into specifics, it's really important to understand and be able to predict that value of a customer in 3 months or 6 months or a year, because the difference between a cohort that's worth, on average, $3 a piece versus $15 a piece is really impactful. And if you're spending 10 to get a bunch of $3 users or vice versa, it's going to make or break, especially, I think, the smaller you are, because you have less room. It's much harder to manage a smaller budget because you have less room for failure and less room for testing. So it's even more important to understand on a cohorted level the value of every single user.
So I don't think our LTV model is going to be as sophisticated, right? So we look at things, the basic things. We look at retention, we look at monetization, and that's like really the starting point. And I don't go too much further other than that, and like the basic in-game play behavior. The thing for us though is that I guess for us, because we're doing a more portfolio model of what we're doing, we focus more of our efforts on post-install. So once we get you, we don't really believe that the LTV curve is fixed. So what we've seen is that we get people coming in on the different games, on different campaigns, and because we're buying across a bunch of different apps, it's pretty easy for us to go in and change tuning after the fact once we get a cohort of users in. So like one thing that we've seen is like we had a dragon themed game that did really like randomly got a whole bunch of installs when Game of Thrones came out, and like just had a ton of installs. And then the conversion after it was just like terrible, right? Like they didn't know what they were doing, didn't know how they were playing. So we changed the tuning and like managed to actually move LTV on that game. So like for us, right, it's like I don't really think that like we're looking at fixed LTV curves and looking at predicting it. We're more looking at like how do we get like good users in according to like the things that we're doing, and then once they're in, because we have the flexibility to change that, because we have all these different SKUs, like how do we extract the value there?
Yeah, I mean, we look at things on a monthly LTV or a monthly cohorted basis. So we basically track. We have one game out in particular called Lucky Play Casino that's been out for 3 years. We have tons of historical data, so it makes it a lot easier to predict kind of the future value of these cohorts based on the historical nature of our game. For some of our new games, it's been a lot more difficult because we don't have that historical data. So things that started out looking fantastic in month 0, kind of fell off the cliff in month 2, and that's not something you can really predict. That's something you just kind of have to deal with when it comes out. So we're definitely not perfect at LTV, but for our primary game, I think we have a really good handle on it by now. I mean, we have 36 monthly cohorts to kind of look at, and we generally know by day 7 whether or not a particular cohort is going to be successful or not, or if we need to tweak something, or if something went wrong with the game, or if our marketing mix is off. We generally know that pretty early, and if as long as things look to be online, we kind of continue doing what we're doing.
There you go. I think that's really well said. I think getting to that point where you have enough data, you're confident in your LTV model, like what you've got pulling in, enables you to create that ROAS target. I think that's number one. What we've seen is the key to scaling. Figure out what you're confident in, and build like the closest ROAS target to the day that you spend your marketing dollar. That decouples you from CPI. You're able to find the highest quality users then, and then you can work independently on other top of the funnel metrics. So let's kind of move the conversation more towards creative, because like creative got called out a couple times, mentioned as like one of the biggest ways to affect your performance. Usually in any channel, but especially on Facebook. I think Facebook, you need to constantly be refreshing creative and testing creative in every which way possible, like Jeet mentioned. I think everybody here is doing a ton of testing. So So yeah, in general, like maybe we'll go like a quick kind of comparison of like we'll start off with Ian. So Ian's kind of he's got the unique perspective. He's got a portfolio approach there. He's got smaller budgets, but he also happens to have really good top of the funnel metrics. And I kind of want to see how we compare across the panel. And if you'd share a little bit about like what you're able to achieve at smaller scale, and see how it changes as you begin to scale up, or like what can you expect as you scale up.
Sure. So let's see. For some of our games, let's start with click-through rates. Click-through rates we see, like some of our worst click-through rates is about 2%. Some of our better click-through rates is about 3%. Yeah, see, like they're laughing because it's just like a different scale. So let's go through this. In terms of like the conversion rates from click, some of our worst ones are about 60% conversion. The better ones are about 75%. The Android numbers tend to be about 30% worse than iOS across all the metrics. And then at the kind of the end of the day, in terms of CPI, we're looking at, I don't know if these guys are about CPI, but overall we try to keep our buys profitably at about like $1.20 for Android and just over $2 for iOS. And in terms of like post-install monetization, we're looking for payback periods definitely less than 3 months, so somewhere around 2. So I'll start with that. I don't know how much.
Very interesting.
How much everyone wants to talk about it.
I don't know who else wants to comment after that. That was pretty awesome. But
it's a hard act to follow.
Yeah. Bryan, would you care to say anything? Or?
Yeah, so I'm probably next in line when it comes to budget. And it's a good thing I have my account team here from Bidalgo because they're trying to keep me honest on my click-through rates. But, when we first launched, so we started working with Bidalgo 3 years ago when we launched Lucky Play, and we probably had 2%, 2.5% click-through rates, and things were, fantastic. And obviously, as the game, is more tenured and has been out there longer, and people see more of your ads, things are definitely going to go down. And then, and then when you put on top of that the scale and starting to spend more money, things will kind of go down even further. You can try to manage that a little bit, but through refreshing creative. But we probably now have somewhere in the 1 to 1.5% range. I'm gonna look at Dario here. That's about right? So it's somewhere in. It'll depend, but it's somewhere in that general vicinity. So we've definitely seen degradation over the last 24 months as we've been more active on the platform.
Sure, and that's kind of like before we go to jump to the big guys. Yeah, like you guys are probably buying an order of magnitude more scale, and like what are some of the ways that as you scale up, can you combat these things?
Yeah, those are very impressive CTRs and install rates. We can share some of the techniques and tips and tricks we are doing instead of going into the CTRs and whatnot. So one thing is the creatives how to combat the creative fatigue. So what works in the US, sometimes if it is fatigued in the US, test it out in new geos. Test it out. I'm not just talking CA, AU, UK, obviously are the common ones, but even try it out in other countries. And sometimes you'll be surprised how well English message works in some countries. So that is one. The other one is, as I mentioned, dynamic custom audience. So they kind of combats the fatigue because there are new people joining in the list, and the trail goes on, and the lookalikes, and so everything is the new people seeing those ads. So these are sort of two top of the mind things we do to combat. And the third biggest thing is obviously you have to create new creatives, and at the end of the day, that is what counts, that matters the most. A down funnel conversion study of the creatives is the best way, because we have discovered sometimes CTRs could be high, but the revenue is not great, or usually CTR is a very, very good indicator. Once the CTR is high, why people are not converting or into pairs and whatnot is basically the game is more responsible for that. But from attracting the right people is what our creatives are meant to do. So that's why we sort of study the down funnel conversion, and we have made some decisions. I think resources are a huge thing, right? Some companies can afford to, some don't. But that's where I guess players like Bidalgo, DAWUP, and a bunch of others that come into play where they can create it for you, and they are on top of it. Your mind is diverted into other agencies and networks and whatnot, but these guys are focused. They know their game. They can pull in the right elements from the winning creatives and combine and test it out. And testing. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a lot of testing. And there are no bad tests, you know, and people get very disappointed at tests or inconclusive tests, but you learn that this is not working. That's a good learning too.
I guess the only thing I would add is, and again, without getting into specifics, but even at previous companies, like looking at, because sometimes you might have something that has a really low conversion, but high click-through, and then you have the opposite, and so you're trying to decide, okay, this has 2% click-through, but a 10% conversion. I've got something else that's, 0.5% click-through, but 80% conversion. What's better? So if you're not looking at those two numbers in parallel, you sometimes can be misled by one or the other. So I would say make sure you're looking at, if you're not already looking at, the install to impression, so that you really have a better understanding of the two kind of combined elements there.
Right. I would say, like, Matt, you guys are pretty unique in that, like, that holds a lot of weight for you guys, and I think it's an insight that I don't think any people have caught on to yet, really. So very interesting. Great. That was pretty interesting stuff. So, like, last little bit on the first topic about how competitive it is to buy. Instagram's been introduced in the last, I think, 9 months or so, depending on how early we're in on the alpha. If we want to just go through really quickly and say, like, how has introducing the Instagram placements, how does it change your overall mix of your budget? Is it are you seeing success? Is it representing a meaningful portion of your budget now? We can let's go in reverse this time. We'll start with Bryan.
Instagram was interesting when we first launched it. It actually showed a lot of promise. I mean, it's obviously a very different channel. Creatives are very different. Use cases are very different. But we had some really good results right off the bat, and then I don't know. Then those cohorts kind of flattened out a little bit. So we've taken a bit of a pause from Instagram. I don't think we're not going to give up on that channel by any means. But for now, it's not as meaningful as I think we had hoped. But I don't know. I'd be interested to hear what everyone else's experiences have been.
We haven't used it.
We've used it. I would say the one catch there is that the creative is super important, and so it adds an extra burden on that side. So a lot of stuff that we create for standard Facebook ads can be repurposed elsewhere. You can repurpose it for like a carousel ad, etc. But also the creative itself needs to be taken into account. It's a very different platform. It can be less kind of direct response and maybe a little bit more artsy, but we've seen other things where it's like the artsy piece that we thought was awesome didn't back out at all, and the more DR type was better. So again, I'd say test. And it's a very different audience. The targeting needs to be very different. So, just when in doubt, you can go broad and then narrow from there.
Do you find it differs between casino and casual?
There are some minor differences. We're still, the casual stuff is still kind of TBD, and we haven't really gone super big there. But there are some minor differences, but not anything glaring.
So for us, it worked amazingly when it was released. It was great. I guess not too much competition, early, and we got into the alpha. So it worked amazingly well, but from there on, it started decreasing. Scaling was also an issue a little bit, and probably the creative aspect. So we have been testing it, but we sort of put it in our Facebook mix. It's part of the whole Facebook portfolio. We certainly spent more since it came out, and then we have reduced it a bit and trying to optimize, trying to put the right creative. But super impressed initially, and Owen and I have to talk, I guess.
So maybe I'll chime in. So
go for it.
No, I think definitely hear you guys, and I think the creative aspects can be different as well. We've actually seen, certainly our revenue grow from that space, and again, the usage is different. I think the most interesting thing we're doing now is actually is what we call placement optimization across Facebook and Instagram, where the user, if it's the user you want to focus on, and if it's better for you to get them on Instagram, i.e. it's basically cheaper, then Facebook will try and serve it there for you. So we are seeing a lot more success with that, because I think the issues you've all mentioned have happened. So we're trying to make it easier to find those users across the two apps.
So the same ad is going to the right place based on click-through or something? Or
Exactly. So you say, what's your audience? Let's say 1% lookalikes. You tick a box, serve this across Facebook and Instagram. Just get the user where they are. Particularly when you're confident in your audience, I think then you'll start to see more of those quality installs in there as well. And I think the creative piece, I said earlier, yes, there is a different aspect to it as well. We have seen from day one, we have seen a lot of people just repurpose the same assets and get pretty good results on Instagram as well. So again, it's a new channel, we're learning, and love the feedback.
And what's just a couple? It could also be the audience type is quite different. But I'd be curious to know if you can share anything on the growth of Instagram, like the new user growth. Is it still very steady, high, medium?
Yeah, so I mean, it's growing very well. We're actually planning on releasing a lot more insights, which I can't really talk about now. But we are. I think that is a need in the market now. To what is the audience? I mean, it is a. The number is quite large. I think it's close to 1 billion that we talked about being on Instagram in our last quarterly earnings report. So even that alone, the crossover with the Facebook audience is quite large, and again, very big in the US and expanding from there. So, I think there's not, again, my own opinion, I don't think there's a huge difference, but there probably is a huge difference how they use the app. Facebook has messaging and other components that Instagram is more visual, it's inspiration. So it's maybe recognizing that, and certainly the time on app is different. And I think that explains maybe not as many impressions, but still the quality users are there.
Right, very interesting. Yeah, I think it's what we've seen kind of like overall is that we refer to it as mixed placements, placement optimization. This is where maybe those of you who've seen square videos appearing in Facebook, that's exactly it. And it's actually has worked pretty well. I think going forward, I think that's like the tip of the spear for everyone who wants to start buying on Instagram. I think that's the place to get started. But as you kind of hear from the panel, you have to really devote a lot to making this work. So,
have you guys tried doing specifically re-engagement stuff with Instagram? If targeting for new isn't as effective?
As in just running re-engagement across mixed placement, or
or targeted to just Instagram? I don't know either.
Targeted to just Instagram. I don't know. Anyone on the panel done?
But I was going to ask Owen how effective or anything you can share on the retargeting on Instagram.
It's the beauty. It's the same system as Facebook, which is again. I mean, our focus is where is the user, and the systems, the method of delivery is the same. So, custom audience you can upload to Instagram and try and get them there as well. So, trying to make it as easy as possible.
In that case, then we have probably retargeted.
Probably, yeah.
Okay, great. Excellent. All right, great. So we're going to move on to our next topic here, which is a little bit of a deep dive about leveraging your unique IP into ad creative. We have a great mix on the panel to talk about this stuff. So let's just really quickly tell me, what is the IP you have, and did you license it? Do you own it? Where did it come from? Jeet?
World Series of Poker, it's a pretty well-known poker brand. We own it. Caesars, who owns Playtika, so it's a very well-known poker brand.
Okay.
We have probably too many to list, but I think the top ones are Wizard of Oz is a big one, but we go all the way down to Tapatio. We have the craziest IP. So we have we have a couple of hundred IP that we license.
We don't have any IP.
We don't have any IP that other than our own slot IP. So we have lots of different slot machines that slot players will recognize, but not necessarily nationally recognizable IP.
Okay, great.
I forgot to add Caesar slots.
Yes, Caesar slots. Excellent. So, okay, so that kind of sets the stage for what we're going to talk about next. So, really quickly, there might be this perception out there that you need IP to have successful social casino. If you care to comment on what is the delta between the performance of ad creatives that are focused on the IP and really leverage the IP, and maybe creatives that are it's not at the forefront of it. Do you see like a big performance difference or not so big? And I think we have an interesting mix of people on here. So I don't know where we want to start. Maybe Bryan is actually a great place to start here.
Yeah, so we, just to give some quick background, so as John mentioned, we were formerly called Rocket Play, and we were acquired by American Gaming Systems, AGS, this time last year. AGS is a real money slot developer out of Vegas. They're primarily, you'll primarily find their slot machines in tribal casinos, so very regionally focused. So we have you'll find a few of our machines in Vegas, but if you play in the Southeast or the Midwest or Southern California, you'll see lots of AGS content. So with that in mind, we have certain areas where we sort of own the state, like Oklahoma, if anyone here is from Oklahoma or gambles in Oklahoma. If you play a slot machine in Oklahoma, you're playing AGS content. It's probably a 99% likelihood you're playing our content. So with that in mind, we went out and did some work with our Bidalgo team to go out with some hyper-local ads and targeting so that we would hit people in Oklahoma, northern Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, what have you, with very specific creative that they would have played in the casinos had they been gambling in the casinos. So the result of that is, they were seeing creative that they had affinity for, they were used to, they played in the casino, and that they, quite frankly, they liked. The performance of those campaigns were, outstanding. So, we would normally on Facebook see, 12-month paybacks or more for that creative, and those targets we were seeing paybacks in the 2 to 3 month range, even though the CPIs were probably, 2 to 3x. So that's how solid the LTV was for those targets. So from that perspective, the IP and just having recognizable content was hugely successful for us. And we've tried to duplicate it in other areas. We've gone to Wisconsin and Kansas and Alabama, Florida, places like that where we know that there's a high concentration of AGS content, and we've seen similar results. But Oklahoma by far, unfortunately, Oklahoma's not a very big state, but it was fantastic in that area.
That's a great example of like figuring out and like taking the insights that you have about your IP, looking at your audience, understanding your audience, and then matching up that creative. Like that's an incredible performance boost. It's all down to creative and matching and understanding.
The other interesting thing is just looking at our business manager is not only are those creatives successful in terms of installs, but the amount of activity that actually happens on that creative with likes and comments and full conversations and shares. It's really interesting that people interact with your ads in that fashion when they actually treat it as content and not advertisements.
Absolutely, that's like the best case scenario. So, anyone else have any thoughts on just like the IP or lack thereof in Ian's case? Like Ian, I'd be curious if you'd chime in. Like, what's your strategy when you have this world out there with like all these big brands? You don't have any big brands. I'd be curious to hear what you think.
Yeah. So for us, like the way that we try to build the next game in our portfolio is we're trying to find the way that we can get the most out of an equivalent of an IP without actually going and getting an IP, right? So not like ripping off people's IP, but like looking for affinity of what people have in terms of the type of content they want. So like I gave the example of like the dragon, right? Like we didn't plan that, but like when Game of Thrones came out, dragon got a big boost. So like for us, looking at things in popular culture, like we pushed out some stuff that was like July 4th themed, like American themed for July 4th. So like the point of the IP is really to give the UA top of the funnel a boost, right? And then to find high affinity in so that you get, high conversion, high value users. So for us, like the test that we do on our existing games in terms of just the seasonal creative rotations, because these guys all talked about like testing creatives, refreshing it, keeping it seasonal and like fresh. That's part of our process for vetting what the next games that we do are, and then we put those out with matching creatives that we already have tested and found that like the entire funnel through makes sense. And so that's our strategy for essentially compensating for not actually have branded IP.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. All right, great. And then like for the bigger guys with the bigger IPs, especially I think Matt, you could probably start with this one. Like, can you describe like what each licensed IP is? Is it overlapping the same audience? Is that the strategy, or is each audience in like additive thing for you in terms of like targeting and demographic?
I mean, from a UA perspective, we use it. You're going to have a very different audience from a Terminator branded machine as you will from a Wizard of Oz. So We treat it kind of in a way that it would just be kind of how anybody would kind of naturally treat that, but kind of everything we run is IP related. So because we have so many big brands, so there isn't really kind of a big. I can't speak to the difference between that and non-IP from that perspective. But yeah, it can potentially open you up to other markets that aren't the traditional kind of 30+ female.
Got it. Great. So we did want to spend some time talking about like the kind of the last main topic here, expanding into tier 2, tier 3 countries. So this is expanding outside of the tier 1 countries, United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, that bucket of English-speaking tier 1 countries. So this is probably like one of the things that we see people are having a hard time with, and they're either not doing it or not doing a good job at that. So like real quickly through the panel again, like are you buying in tier 2, tier 3 right now? And if so, like is it a meaningful scale at this point? Start off.
Sure. The answer is yes. Quick answer is yes, absolutely. Facebook is very strong in some tier 2, tier 3, so we have been testing it. Culturalization, localization becomes an important component, but always test your English ads, because you'll be surprised how good some of them can turn out to be. Then there are aspects of I think the creative, the color, the background, if you have some cultural elements related to that country. China is very different from elements you would use in Japan. So always be testing and keep doing those A/B endlessly, and you'll figure out the right mix. But yes.
Great.
I would echo every word you just said. We're also doing tier 2 and tier 3.
Great.
Nope, just tier 1.
Ditto to that. We just, for us, we have a limited budget, so we focus on tier 1. I will say we have had some success in Mexico, but again, AGS has a lot of content in casinos in Mexico. Mm-hmm. So wherever we've been able to do that, we've used our local strategy and have had some success there.
Very interesting. Yeah. So we started off by talking about LTV and talking about how you can segment and create different LTVs per geo. So one of the ways, though, it's like, that's a lot of work. I don't think everyone has a full BI team. Like some of the guys here do, some of them don't. For people in the audience that they don't have this dedicated resource for it, it can be like hard to even get started. But Facebook's actually created a brand new product to kind of help this exact problem. So I don't know, Owen, if you want to like start off by talking about that.
Yeah, there's a few things. I mean, firstly, we've seen a lot of casinos going to tier 2, tier 3 the last year. The starting point actually is they go very high level, just age and device. And if somebody has an iPhone and maybe what we consider tier 2 markets, they actually probably are relatively wealthy and therefore can spend on the game. So that's always a good proxy. We just launched international lookalikes. We mentioned it earlier, but it's really where you built up, say, payer data in a market like the US or Australia. You can use that to build an audience in another country where previously you couldn't. So our system is getting much better at predicting if this is what a pair looks like in the US. We think a pair looks like this in, let's say, Mexico. So it's another way to jumpstart in there as well. So we see that working really well. And just even starting broad, bidding a bit lower within those markets, and then from there refining down. But again, it comes back to the time and the resource, and it's probably why we only see the companies who be more established for longer doing it. I think the guys maybe next year will be saying, well, now it's a considerable part of our revenues, given they've got more time, more resources by then.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely something. Yeah, it takes a lot more resources to devote and become successful in tier 2, tier 3. But what we've seen is that it is worth it to do it. So we don't have a ton of time left. There's like a few more minutes before we kind of open up. Is there a lot of questions? Just like raise your hand if you have a question. We have a little bit more we can talk about. So, all right. Well, I'll go through with a few more questions, and then we'll open it up again as we get towards the end. So, like kind of final topic was like more about the future of growth. how can we continue to grow? Like, you have some big companies on this stage who have already grown huge. So the question for them is a little bit different than the guys in the medium and small categories, so to speak. Not that you're small, but you're big in your own way. So, yeah, I think it's how can you grow? And it's we've seen some huge breakout successes in social casino over the last 12 months. Is there a way for you to create a breakout hit of your own, no matter how big big you might be today, or is it more incremental? Let's start with Ian. Actually, we'll go to Ian first.
So, I mean, I think the question is starting from a UA perspective, but I don't think for us growth in terms of like kind of getting to the next stage starts with UA. I think UA and our marketing efforts informs our product development. But I mean, at least for me personally and for us, we're looking at what can we do that's kind of like a step change in terms of the product that we're doing, and how do we differentiate, right? Like we've talked about like all the things that these guys are doing in terms of like the scale that they're at, the markets that they're in, the IPs that they have. And so like I think there are other companies on the market, even in social casino where it's super crowded, who have succeeded without those things necessarily. So I think it's still possible. And I think for us, it starts with like basically taking the lessons that we've learned in terms of what types of like ads translate well into like IPs that people already are like have high affinity to, and then marrying that with custom mechanics and custom gameplay. That's the approach.
Great, very interesting. Bryan, why don't you go next?
Yeah, I guess I would. The answer to that is probably it depends what your threshold for pain is. It's a very crowded segment. If someone came up to me right now and said, "Should I start a social casino game company?" I would probably say no. I mean, it's really, really difficult, and it really depends on kind of what you're looking to do. But UA has to play a role in there somewhere. And if you have aspirations to even be top 20 grossing or top 25 grossing or something like that, then you're gonna have to spend a sizable amount of money to get there, or catch lightning in a bottle, a la Old Vegas or someone like that. I mean, it's gonna be really, really difficult. So it's not something you should enter into lightly.
It's very interesting. Like if people saw the panels earlier, there was the smaller indie panel, and everyone across the board said, "Yeah, it's still great to go out there and make a new social casino." And
I mean, it depends what you're trying to do, right? I mean, if you're a 3-person shop and you can probably make a decent living and making pretty good money doing it at that scale. If you want to, we're kind of in this kind of tweener phase right now where we were smaller. We were acquired to scale, and now we're sort of in this kind of mid-level where we need to be able to compete with some of the bigger companies, and we kind of get priced out of some of that inventory. So it's challenging when you're in sort of that like in between stage. I mean, doesn't mean you can't do it, but you definitely have to work a little harder and you got to hustle a little more.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because you've seen just how hard it is to go to the next level, and you've kind of made it there, and I think like that's a unique perspective, and feel free to disagree with people because exactly how hard it is. So
I mean, one thing which is a good segue into there are these 3-person shops, but all these big players are also looking to buy IP. I mean, when there's a certain level of success, and that should be one of the big drivers for the small medium, and like you were acquired as well, and then Playtika has acquired, Zynga has acquired. There has been always a growth through acquisition. The other thing is, when there is always going to be a lot of competition in this space. How do you differentiate? I mean, we are a live operations game. You always try to be on top of your game, innovate, push out content that is engaging, brings people back. And all of us in the panel, I mean, the reason we are here is we are doing it in some scale, shape, or form. So be on top with the live operations. Playtika has differentiated itself by producing quality content, with very, very low frequency, the days between. So being nimble, listening to the customers, and also predicting where they're going, and that's how we see growth. Acquisition will always be there, but make your game better.
Right. Right. Yeah, growth.
Engage them. Yeah.
Yeah, growth in 2016 means more than just how do I do better UA or.
I mean, I'd add a few things. I've seen this for a while. I think it's. I mean, obviously I haven't been in your shoes, but because we consistently see new companies coming out. I think for me the difference this year is those that haven't made it to the, let's say, the top 10 or whatever you want to call it, that they're able to make a living now from the in-app advertising. That's an incredible business. You know, we've got our own solution in Audience Network. There's others out there. It's an incredible way to at least, you know, pay for your acquisition. I think the other piece is if you look at a long term, and you know, maybe taking it back a few years, and again, as a European who comes from where we've a lot of regulated markets, and that's probably where I specialize in with real money gaming, is we are now beginning to see, like state by state beyond New Jersey, things like online poker and online casino being passed in state senates. And you know, you already have, if you built up this user base, you're already monetizing them. There's a great commercial opportunity potentially there in a few years. And again, I've never seen so much acquisition and valuation. I think the rumors around Playtika, and obviously we can't comment, but you know, the stories are like over 4 billion in terms of the valuation. They were a small shop, dev shop in Tel Aviv, like, you know, 7-8 years ago. I mean, it's amazing. So it seems like a lot of value, a lot of work, but a lot of value in the industry from where I sit.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree.
I gotta read more newspapers.
I would add just one thing on the growth side is that I think it honestly is driven by making awesome products, and we see that with games. Like every few months, some awesome game comes out and makes a ton of money. Yeah. But it also has to be good enough to keep somebody within the game for years. So UA can support product, and it should be informing product. But ultimately, the addressable market is only so large, and so you know, your UA teams can get it to everybody, but if the product's not there, it won't work. I had an old advertising professor that's always stuck with me, is that nothing will kill a bad product faster than great advertising. So, you know, if you bring a lot of people really quick to a game that's not ready, you can kill the game. So you have to make a great game.
Very applicable quote. I think I saw it earlier. You know, somebody had it up there. Yeah, it's definitely like always a relevant thing. Okay, great. We have like about 5 minutes. We have maybe,
questions. Yeah.
You know, a few questions. Let's open it up.
I have a question.
Okay.
So platforms on top of Facebook, like Nanigans or Bidalgo, are you guys using any of these platforms, and do you find that an effective, you know, supplement to Facebook?
Who wants to start off? I mean,
we're a managed service customer from Bidalgo, so.
Do you find it? I mean, what is that giving you that you're not getting from Facebook, or how is it adding to the Facebook?
Well, they're all staring at me, so I'll answer it. No, I mean, it's fantastic. It's really hard to do Facebook on your own. Meaning, at any given time, we have hundreds of different, you know, campaigns out there with different taglines and creative and targets and things like that. So it'd be impossible for us to do that on our own with the staff that we have. So I think a managed services for us is required.
That's even more true for us.
I mean, without naming names, an absolute advantage is to attain scale, you need a platform. You need good optimizers, good optimization skills, good creatives, and not always everyone has that. Because people let's say in my team, they're managing a wide variety of different, you know, right from ASO to different networks to Facebook and Facebook's other 800-pound gorilla friend, and you know, it's all over the place. So you need those sometimes absolutely for all of the things I mentioned, from creatives to the skill optimization and whatnot. You certainly need that.
What Jeet said.
great. That's really interesting too.
I gotta start charging now.
That's great. You can see the whole client life cycle there. Like when you're smaller and you need a lot of help, there are solutions in the market, and then as you get bigger, your needs change, and you need a very, very powerful tool to continue to grow internally and reach much larger targets. So it's good that there's something in the market for everybody. Great.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, everybody.